guys, and welcome back to RedStone Productions. Today we are in a very special place somewhere on the west coast of Ireland. This is Brian's house, and this is where we're going to be recording the brand new album from Strainful Train together with Brian and Denise, so check it out. So we tracked the entire album in Brian's living room. Brian was kind enough to invite us all to his house, where we basically had enough space to fit each one of the instruments, including my mobile rig. The living room itself is reasonably sized. It's really good because it's made of a lot of wood and has a lot of absorptive material on the actual floor. The first thing I had to figure out is where to position myself. Of course, I wanted to be among the instruments, but at the same time, I didn't want to restrict their own space. So at first I tried to position myself behind the kitchen counter, but then I felt a little bit too isolated from the actual musicians. Then I put myself back into the fireplace spot to finally find my own spot somewhere in between Benny's, lead singer's position, and Hendrik playing guitars for us. The next thing I had to figure out, of course, it was how to position the instruments within the same room. The biggest challenge was the percussion positioning. That's by far the loudest instrument we tracked in the same room. So I wanted to make sure to put himself far away from the softest sources, like the violin, the acoustic guitar, or the lead vocals themselves. So for this reason, I positioned on one side of the room Brian's percussions, and next to him, Tim's position, the double bass. Coming up next on his left-hand side, there was Denise playing the fiddle, and after her there was Benny singing and playing banjo for us. Then it was my position in between Benny, and on my left-hand side, Hendrik playing acoustic guitar. The idea was to make sure I had the cleanest possible sound on each of the sources without having to deal with so much bleed. Each of the microphones were in cardioid mode, so picking up front, rejecting all of the sounds from the back and the sides. In order to get even better results with this positioning, I also used some of the extra mic stands we packed with us as actual stand for our blankets. This way I contain the bleed of the loud percussion sources from leaking into all of the other softer sources microphones.
Yeah, take a trip around, just miles away from home. Upside down, so why not? It feels so fine, like I'm losing my mind. We are drifting all along the line.
A friend of ours was forwarding us Brian's contact, and 2 years ago, during that tour, we met him in Canberra in a small pub. He's a great percussionist and is adding lots of cool sounds to our original music. So 2 years later now, we decided, let's try to bring them all together. Also Denise on fiddle, who we met 2 years ago. Get them all in one room and see what happens.
First of all, like they're master of their instruments, and second, they're cool to hang out with. So it was reason enough to come again.
Ain't got no shoes, ain't got no socks, but we are sitting on the top, 'cause we've got a head full of love, and all we need on our backs. Yes, we are dressed in rags. Oh, it smells like life, take a breath. And sometimes sweet and sometimes bitter.
They're just amazing musicians. It's great having a chance to play with them. And it was a great experience, so I do it anytime.
We did some playing together, and they're a nice bunch of guys to hang out with. The music was pretty good. It was a chance to play with them again and see how the house worked as a studio as well.
Once I figured out where each one of us was going to be positioned, it was time to finally plug the electricity in. I made sure to bring along with me a power conditioner that's basically providing and distributing power to all of my outboard gear. But one of the biggest mistakes I did, it was not to bring along with me an actual adapter for the UK style plugs. So the very first day we had to deal with it without having any chance to purchase an adapter. So that's when Tim's skills came in very handy, and with his help we managed to kind of create a ground loop situation that would allow us to still operate on day one, waiting on the next day to make sure to purchase the correct adapter. One of the biggest restrictions we had to deal with, of course, it was space. I made sure to bring somewhere around 8 to 9 mic stands. I was basically augmenting each of the mic stands with extra clamps or stereo bars so they could fit more than one mic per stand. For the very same reason, we also packed 2 long multi-core stage boxes. This way we just had 2 long runs of multi-cables into my interface, avoiding 20 different lines coming to me and basically creating a spaghetti sauce all around Brian's living room. A really nice thing I would like to mention, it was the geography of this whole project. In fact, Strainful Train band, based in Berlin, had to travel to Amsterdam, pick up the gear they had packed for them, travel all the way to France, where they would pick up a ferry. The ferry would leave them in Dublin, and then keep on driving to the Midlands, where they would meet with Denise, having a few days of rehearsal along with Brian, and then drive all the way to the west coast of Ireland, to the County Clare, where all of the recordings took place. Talking about the actual setup we use for the recordings, my normal approach when it comes down to percussions, especially when you have plenty of percussions, like in this case, it's to go with a stereo bar, so a stereo AB overhead. In this case I use 2 AKG C414, and then augment that stereo image with specific spot mics on the different sources. 2 SM57 on the actual cajon, augmented with the AT4033 to get the extra boom out of the back of the cajon itself. On top of that, it was playing a really interesting instrument, native from Ireland, the Boran, I hope I pronounced that correct, that was being mic'd up on top of the existing mic setup with the AT4050 from Audio-Technica.
This instrument here is actually made locally by Ben March. He just lives across the mountain from where we are now. The Baron has been evolving, particularly in the last 30 years. It was a very different looking instrument, a much simpler instrument when I started playing initially. And then this is a drum that I got Ben, I designed with Ben, so especially for my needs. It's got lots of warm bass. Excuse me, my interview. And then it's got, inside here, it's got an inscription in Irish, Barrian an Gleas Seo Fascisti. So Baron is the name of the drum, but Barrian is a verb in the Irish language, which means to annoy. So this is just a slightly more pacifist version. It means this machine annoys fascists. So that's the Ben March Baron.
If we move to the double bass territory, so Tim's place, his instrument comes with the piezo pickup. Still made sure to pick that signal up with the use of a radio J48 active DI, just to have it in case we would get so much bleed into the actual mic. That was, in this case, a 4035, where the actual violin keys are located. And that would allow us to have pretty much the best possible mix between the direct sound coming off the DI, which is pretty sterile, and a really nice, alive mic setup from the actual front of the double bass. On top of that, I should also mention that since his playing style, it's very dynamic, I also engaged a VCA compressor, the C2 from Alsmart, on the bass mic itself. Denise was playing a really old, beautiful fiddle. The normal setup with that type of instrument, at least when it comes down to mic it on live situations like this, I normally go and pick up the DI, which again was pretty nice in this case. It's an LR Baggs Venue DI, so even with some extra settings, which we kept pretty flat, augmented again with a large diaphragm condenser microphone.
It belonged to my grandfather's brother, Uncle Dan, so when he died then, Dad got it and then Dad gave it to me then. It was a German fiddle, so it kind of fits in with the... I love it, because it's kind of mellow and, you know, I suppose I've just been playing it for so long, like. Somebody stole it out of a car and smashed it into bits, and then it's been broken up into pieces and all and put back together.
If we move to Benny's territory, Benny is the lead singer of the band, along with playing harmonica and banjo and acoustic guitar in one specific song. For his setup, I went for one mic stand, where I put first of all his lead vocal mic, a Neumann U87, plugged into my Neve 1073, plugged into the second compressor we have available, which is the C2 from Allsmart, a VCA style compressor, just tipping the transient and making sure that I keep his vocal under control in terms of dynamics.
Yeah, take a trip head on, just miles away from home. Turn this world upside down, so why not?
On the very same mic stand, I also clamped an Audio-Technica 804050, which basically was making sure to pick up the banjo sounds and the acoustic guitar when it was time to play it. The two Martin acoustic guitars from Hendrik were picked up by an AB stereo configuration. So I used an Audio-Technica 804047 positioned somewhere on the 12th fret of the guitar, while the second mic was going for a more rounder tone, more kind of a warmer tone, and there was an AKG C214 placed on the other side of the guitar, somewhere below the actual bridge. That's normally my preferred mic, but by having the two positioning, I was pretty much guaranteed that no matter what kind of sound we were chasing, I would be able to achieve it by mixing the two signals in. On top of that, of course, we also had backing vocals from both Hendrik and Tim. And for those, I used two Audio-Technica A5400s handheld condenser microphones. As you guys probably know from the previous episode, I packed a headphone amplifier with me, and with the use of the RME Total Mix, I was pretty much able to create up to 4 different stereo mixes for the talents. But in this specific production, there was no real need for that. The band was so well rehearsed, and the type of music was kind of demanding something different, some sort of old way of recording. In fact, the band wanted to play live in the same room, without metronome, without click, and even more without the use of any headphones for monitoring purposes. The idea was that they had to balance themselves in the same room. Of course, I was wearing headphones to make sure that all of the signals coming in were getting correctly recorded, and whenever they felt they had a really good take, then we'll put the headphones on, play back out, and if we were sure about each one of the parts, then we'll call it good. The funniest part of all of this is after a few hours, we had all of the setup in place, while it was also time to set up for a party mode. In fact, Brian's idea was to basically host a nice house party and have also the chance to use the space as a sort of a stage and see how that would perform. Of course, whenever there's a party or a gig in Ireland, I learned this on my own, you can absolutely bet there's gonna be plenty more musicians showing up. Most of them with their own instruments, but for sure if they don't carry their own instrument, they're gonna ask you for one. And if they cannot even play any instrument, you can absolutely bet they're gonna sing along with you. We had to track down the whole recording setup. While all of this was happening, I was like, okay, it would be actually really interesting to record each of the tracks separate without overkilling it. And in this way, I would allow the players to hear back whatever they played and to assess the goodness of each of their performances that was gonna be recorded the day after on the actual record. I put my mobile rig aside and I borrowed Hendrik's mobile rig, which is basically made of Odeon ID14 to mic pre's with ADAT in. So for that purpose, we used a Focusrite 8-channel mic pre with ADAT out. I used DIs for both bass and violin, stereo overheads on percussion, one mic on guitar, one mic on Benny's banjo, one mic on his vocals, and then just 2 extra mics for the guests that maybe would join the actual live gig.
travel to Ireland with all those sessions going on in the pubs and collaborate with other musicians.
When we asked if somebody wants to join in from the audience, this usually just happens in Ireland.
Especially for handmade music, I guess Ireland is a very good place to be. So people will really appreciate music.
But the bread is not so good.
No police, no soldiers, no politicians, no borders and no war. We don't need you anymore.
One nice thing about performing live is that your mistakes are over when they're over. When you record, that doesn't happen, your mistakes are forever.
Before you might think you're a grand player, and then suddenly you know all your limits, so you have something to work on. Well, once you do spend a while in the studio, you can hear what you need to do.
Get that connection with people. Last night now we were in a pub in the middle of nowhere, Bell Harbour, County Clare. In that context people were able to come up and play with us and also sing from where they were, so we'd give something and we'd get something back. The sense of being together, like everybody in the pub was there for the one thing, they were there to listen to the music. So I think we need that in life. I think some people find it in religion, they go to mass and they're all there doing something together. Some people go to rock concerts, some people go to traditional music session. In Berlin they go to techno raves.
The sun is shining and birds are flying.
Since we wanted to capture everything live, there was not really much more to be done once we were set with the best possible take, except for a few things. Starting with Tim, who basically overdubbed only once. Backing vocals, Tim is playing double bass, but in one occasion he asked to overdub his vocal. We also overdubbed a few violin solo parts from Denise. For those kind of occasions, you want to leave the musician the freedom to go back to his or her recording and give the best. With Brian we did a few overdubs. All of the foundations of the tracks were being played live along with all of the other instruments. But there were specific occasions where it felt the need to overdub specific parts. Talking about the shaker parts, a few cymbal parts, they wanted to keep it isolated just in case we want to use it or not use it, just to have that separation that in mixdown would also allow me to get the best out of his recordings. On top of that, he played a really nice big drum. I've never seen something that big, at least going on a record with me. It was just not really practical to bring this huge drum into our living room, and it was just so much easier to just take one of the Audio-Technica large condenser diaphragm and stick it in front of it and just grab it from wherever it was positioned. All in all, I'm really looking forward to import all of the assets in my own studio, start editing the pieces and start the hybrid mixing process in the studio. As you know, we have plenty of analog gear. We're not gonna use fancy digital effects. We're just gonna stick to the bare and bones and be pretty much respectful of the whole live recording session we did in Ireland. So, till the next time.